My name is Julie Kraft and I have bipolar 2 disorder.
I'm Shaley Hoogendoorn and I live with bipolar 2 disorder.
I was diagnosed 10 years ago at the age of 36.
I was told of my diagnosis and I remember being relieved but also terrified. I know the perceptions and the stigma that goes along with it. I started sharing my story about 4 or 5 years ago.
I decided to come forward and start sharing. It's led to me meeting the most amazing people walking the same path.
So we had talked about collaborating. My greatest hope is that others will hear our stories and feel less alone.
We can offer insight and give the world a real life living example of what bipolar disorder can look like.
This is bipolar.
This is bipolar.
Hi everyone, welcome back to an episode of This is Bipolar. We are pumped because it is our first question and response. I always say that because I don't feel like we're professionals or have any answers, but we can definitely respond to questions. Reel it back. I'm Shaley Hoogendoorn. I'm a mama, wife, a mental health advocate, and I live, if you haven't been following along, this is your first one, I live with bipolar 2 disorder. And this is my co-host.
I'm Julie Kraft, also a passionate mental health advocate living with bipolar 2 disorder. I'm also a wife, a mom, an artist, an author, and thrilled to be a part of this podcast with my co-host, Shaley.
Yay. Well, let's get right into it. So we put it out on our Instagram, and then we thought of a lot of questions that we've gotten in the past and such. If your question didn't make it on here, plan to do a bunch of these again. Also, I'm your Instagram girl, so if you ask the question, I get to it. It sometimes takes me a long time. So if it's more than a month, give me a poke and remind me, hey, just wondering. But I do at this point, I get to them all eventually. So let's start off with some questions. So it's so funny. We'll just say this. We do this every episode, but we're like, let's get totally organized. And I get my notebook out and then we try, and then we're just like, go for it. So it's funny that we do that. And then we were trying to organize this episode, but it's question and response. So they might not go all together. So I'm going to try to ask the ones about hypomania and mania first. So one of the things that says, it says, how do I overcome a manic episode? I'm going to edit it a bit because I don't think, we're so sorry, but we don't think that it is possible to completely overcome. But we have different strategies or things that could help us. Julie, what are your most helpful ones?
Okay.
Manage mania.
All right. So hypomania for me is overwhelmingly positive. It can have negative effects though if it's not managed. So for me now, it shows up though as a creative burst of energy. Normally after a dry spell of no ideas or ambition to take on any new project, I suddenly feel this invigorating burst of energy. And so number one, I make sure I get my sleep, because my first impulse is to not sleep. I'm so excited about what I'm working on. Who needs sleep? So I have in the past been known to go, days and days on 1 to 2 to 3 hours sleep. So I know, regardless of how excited I am, to make sure I get my sleep. Also make sure that the other things around the house that are my responsibilities at this point in my life get done. Oftentimes in the past, groceries were at the bottom of my list. Basically, if it wasn't fun and part of the project I was working on, it didn't get done. So I make sure that I give my kids, the groceries, the house, my husband, some of my attention, because it's very tempting to just get focused and not see anything else outside of my project. It is easy to believe that you are just investing your time and energy into the next best thing that the world needs. So those are a few of my tips to managing my hypomania. Just be aware and just know that I can be excited and I can work on my project, but I also need to not lose sight of the other people and areas of my life.
For those of you that are listening that are wondering if you have a mood disorder, or think, oh yeah, I get into projects too, or, you know, me, especially when I do event planning, yeah, because it's one of those ones that you're all in, and then it's like event, and then it's not the event, right? I think the difference is it takes completely over. Like, we're not kidding about, like, forget to eat, and I love eating normally, right? Forget to sleep, forget to drink the water, forget to, and everything else irritates. Like, you're all in. And the other thing you touched on is you actually think that it's like, we always say the best idea ever, but I think it's beyond that sometimes. And with real mania, you think that it's going to save the world, or it's the best idea ever, or if you don't get it out in the world, like that, it's so needed and so awesome. And if anybody questions it or anything, you just think they don't get it.
Yeah, they're a party pooper raining on your parade. And you
Yeah.
also, there is this sense of urgency, because with bipolar disorder, the hypomanic episodes, they come and go along with creativity. And so in those not so creative times, you know, you're just desperate to feel that energy again. And so when it comes, you feel like you have to capture it, use it all, harness it before it disappears. So that's also a part of that.
Yeah, the urgency. So I think the tip there would be to, remind yourself and pace yourself, right? Because it does feel urgent. And I remember, unlike Julie's is more, what we've talked about is a little bit more sporadic. She doesn't know. Whereas I generally, not so much anymore, but pre-medication, it was like to the month. So I basically felt panicky the entire time, because I felt like I basically lived in those 6 months of hypomania, kind of stable, hypomania, kind of stable. But I knew when I hit the deep depression that all those projects would go out the window. And so I lived in this state of, and I don't think I was completely cognizant of it, but I realized looking back, and or then there's the extra urgency down, like, when am I going to run out of the energy? When am I going to crash and burn? So I think pacing yourself. So I now ask other people, is this a realistic expectation to get done in a day? Or is this, is this a reasonable amount of hours to work on something, right? And also your baseline is different. So I don't actually, it's hard because you don't trust other people when I'm hypomanic. Like, I think they just don't know, or they just don't get it. And so that's hard to find a person that you trust. And also try to have a loose plan or talk about something, because I always joke that if like someone tried to fall, I get it all done, and I'm an event planner. So you'd think that I was like systematic and did it, which I am, but I'll like be emailing something that will remind me to do this, or right. So it all gets done, but it's not like sequential in order. I can't put myself in a box. I've tried to be like that and I'm miserable, but just have a general idea. And what I ask myself, this question is, what needs to be done today? What would I be disappointed about? And then I tell myself, if I'm hypomanic, take at least 3 things off that list, because I know that I'm already doing that. So I think, and prioritizing. I think you also talked about being prepared, right? Now that I am medicated, I tell, like, I know, or even I was saying last week, I don't usually work 4 full days teaching a week and do all the podcast work. And I worked with another organization called She Loves Magazine. And so I like to do all the things, right? Even when I'm not hypomanic, right? Since medicated, but I knew I was working 4 days a week. And so I prepped, like I told my husband, I think that I shouldn't make meals this many, like, can you take over that? I brought frozen, I tried to make things easier out here so that I could do that thing. Cause we're all in when we do something.
And the other tendency is to have a million ideas, start a million different projects, commit to 5 million different things. And unfortunately, what often happens is in the highs, during the highs, you take on all these new projects, say yes to all these new things. But then, for me, yeah, there is no schedule. There's no warning sign for when my hypomania is going to go away. And so oftentimes I found myself starting a million projects, losing that creative burst and energy, and then ending up, on top of, maybe if I'm already depressed, feeling even worse about things because I've got all these unfinished things. It feeds that, that negative thinking that, I'm a starter and not a finisher.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I really wanted to add in also is ask for the people around you to sort of keep you accountable with your sleeping and eating and everything. And so once I was working on one of my books and my daughter came out, it was 2 a.m. and she said, "Mom, get to bed. I know you're excited, but if you don't get your sleep, you're going to turn into a bit of a monster." So also, having, whether it's your friends or your family, having that support system around you that can also be looking for those warning signs and gently and lovingly steer you towards the bedroom at 3 a.m. if that's what you need. So that also helps too, to have.
Yeah. And I feel like I just say sleep like it's obvious, but the more I've been reading about, people professionals are actually saying that it is also considered under a sleep disorder. And so some people are nervous to take medications, but when you're really hypomanic or manic, a lot, in my experience, and as not a professional and talking to a lot of people with bipolar, it doesn't matter. You can have the best sleep routine, you can have everything, but your actual physiological insides can't calm down. And so don't be afraid to take medication, because honestly, I know there's side effects for things and I know it's scary and I know, but sleep trumps for me, right? It does, because I take one of the medications that I take, it's the side effect is sleep. So, but if it wasn't, I would probably have to take a sleeping pill as well, because I've tried all the other things. And I think that is 100% okay, because the fallout and the not sleeping and all the anxiety and just what it does to my body to not sleep isn't worth it. And in fact, and that's really hard, because I loved the waking up before everybody else. And I love that time. And I still struggle like the middle of the night when no one's up. But it feels like a huge sacrifice to me, because I could sleep until 10 or 11 and I beat myself up and like, what a loser that you sleep all day and all of that. But when I don't, I'm not going to be able to come down from the hypomania in any kind of productive way. It'll be a crash and it'll be hard. Yeah. So yes. Okay. So this is kind of huge. So maybe we'll just do a yes or no, and then one reason why, because I could talk about this for 100 episodes.
All right.
Does it get easier to manage bipolar disorder?
Do you want to tackle that one first, or are you going to throw it to me?
I'll tackle it. And it's so funny because I just said give a yes or no, but now now my answer is it depends. Yeah, it depends. Okay, so it depends on your idea of easier. If there is treatment. It is incurable. And I'm actually dealing with the word, like, it is chronic, and you will get episodes again, and it won't go away forever and ever. That's just hard and sad. And even I hate that in the pit of my stomach. And I'm still grappling with the idea of, that it's a chronic ongoing illness, even though I know, like, that's hard for me, especially in my stability time. I'm like, nope, I'm fine. But I think if you do those steps, it does get easier, and then it gets hard, and then it gets easier. But is that a slow moving, easier that I've mastered it, or that, I've overcome? That would be a no, but there's so much hope and you can flourish.
Yes.
Julie.
Yes. So my answer would be along the same lines of you. Yes, sort of, maybe, kind of, it depends. But overall, I would say yes. And it becomes easier in that, number one, what you're dealing with. A diagnosis is a name It's an answer. It's a reason, not an excuse. I always like to throw that in there, but at least you know what you're dealing with. You can dig into it. You can learn about it, connect with other people. And I think, I was diagnosed, let's see, back in 2010, not the best at math, but 12 years in, I definitely feel like at this point, even though there are definitely still highs and lows, they are absolutely more manageable. It is possible, to live, dare I say, thrive, and also have bipolar disorder. And I don't want to sugarcoat it or glamorize it because I still have my darker times. I definitely have my days when my anxiety, peaks high. But I also, on the flip side, have just as many days where I'm, happy and hopeful and managing my hypomania. And so I think it all comes down to just being more self-aware, having a support system. There are so many pieces of the puzzle. But if I have to pick between a yes or a no, does it get easier? I'm going to say yes.
Yeah. And that isn't to say that there aren't, like I've had, especially during the pandemic, I've had full entire days, weeks that I hadn't in a long time of medication, feeling like hopeless. I have felt that, and it surprised me. But I had to cling to the idea that it wasn't gonna, it doesn't last forever. I can't say how long because it depends on people, but another thing to bounce off yours is you talked about, we talk about all the time how it's freaky, scary, you feel terrible, all the things about getting the diagnosis, but also it being free. And I used to think don't put me in a box, and I get frustrated with that. And sometimes, still, but what I've tried to do in the last 5 years or so is reframe it. And I think of it as a container. So it's not closed. I think of bipolar as a container. And so it's a container that helps me understand, containers have sides, right? And that's my limits, right? That's the things like knowing what's too much for me, knowing what's not. But it also, you can hold beautiful things in a container, and you can choose when to put a lid or not have a lid on a container.
Yeah.
And so I just find that's so much more helpful. It's a container, and it makes me feel, it explains a lot of things so that I don't just be like, I suck. It's like, actually, I have an illness, so that is this much harder for me. Yeah. Or I want to think I can do everything, but that is too risky for the type of the way my brain works. And so if you can try and think of it as a container that can hold you, and honestly, it can keep you safer, right? So if I know you're gonna, it's really struggling with it, and we're talking 12 years in. Yeah.
And for me, I think 12 years in has given me 12 years of going through those lows, but then coming out of them. And so now I can look back over the past, decade and see that, yes, those darker times will end. Those feelings are temporary. So if you're someone that's just, in one of those first initial darker times, and you don't have that life experience to know that things will get better, and then they'll get harder, and then they'll get better. I just want to encourage you that, yes, it's definitely, there are ups and downs, but I think it really helps at this point to look back and see, what I've come through, what I've survived, and that we are so strong and so resilient, all of us, for what we've come through. And that also, I think, helps to make it a bit easier.
Because regular life is hard, and I think it's okay to admit that it's that much harder. It really is. And I'm, it saddens me to have to say that, but if you can learn about yourself and harness it, you do beautiful, amazing, wonderful things. We wouldn't have half the art and music if you start looking into mood disorders or mental illness. So I cling on to that, but it actually, and I wouldn't have said this to myself in the beginning, but it actually, thinking about that word, incurable or chronic, is actually helped me, because it's removed different expectations of me. and also help me accept, because we're here, you choose how you want to do things with your healing journey but Julie and I are pro medication. It changed our lives, and we know it's hard. Yeah, and you do you, but we're not going to sugarcoat that we really have had I don't think that I would be where I am today without it. And another thing with that, like, someone asked that I think piggybacks on that is, can you go into remission, or I'm on medication and I'm hypomanic again, or whatever. Don't stop your medication. It doesn't mean that it's not working. You're going to have those. It will probably mute it a bit. Yes, of course, if it's extreme, go back and talk to your doctor. But if you can wrap your head around that it's not curable, then you'll know, like, you'll be able to tell, and your people will be able to tell if the medication is even helping. Obviously, if it's not helping, medical doctor, help you wean off and try something else. But a lot of times it's so tempting. And I have to admit, Julie, lately I have been in 12 years, I haven't had a huge depression. And I think it's a low grade one, but when I finally admitted and got over it's not that bad. I've been in it for a while, and I do have thoughts, and I'm not going to do it. But right now, I really want a hypomanic episode. And I think that, and I have to fight that thought, because I don't have a lot of ideas or motivation. And I get in this thing where I feel like I'm wasting my life, and, I'm struggling right now. And so I hear you and I see you when you say you want to get off medication, but I can guarantee you the hypomania and mania is not worth it. It is not worth that. Do we wish we could bottle up the good parts of it? 100%. Yeah. Can we harness it? Yes, but don't stop your medication. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah. So yeah. It also says, so are people with bipolar indecisive? You go.
Wow. Okay. I love that one. Yes and no. Exactly. Oh my goodness, I've done it to myself. I guess it depends, but I do often use the people around me as a sounding board. But then there are other areas of my life where, whether it comes to clothing or a paint color or a direction I want to take my new home, I am extremely decisive, stubborn, strong-willed, motivated. But I think mostly when it comes to maybe dealing with relationships or people, or what should I say, what should I write, I'll go to my husband, can you reread this text or this email? And that's the area where I become less sure about myself and my reactions and my feelings, and that's where I can get into trouble. But when it comes to anything in a store, I know what I want, and I go after it. So definitely when it comes to people, relationships, feelings, more indecisive. How about you?
Yeah. And you know what I just kind of realized? It seems probably pretty obvious to everybody, but I find I don't think we're going to be able to give yes and no answers, because here's the thing, is bipolar, two opposites. So I answer and things completely differently if I am depressed, if I am stable, if I am manic, if I am anxious. So that it's impossible, because I can say, I can, when I'm hypomanic, I can make decisions. And sometimes I make them quick and fast, because indecisiveness is painful, right? So I feel like I'm either almost sometimes too quick to make decisions and impulsive, and then I can't make a decision to save my life, right? So definitely. So
I just remembered something that I was extremely indecisive, and to this day I just shake my head. But with my memoir, when it came to the cover, I was so indecisive that I literally had 60 different versions. Some of them were just a different shade of blue, a font, a different size shifted over, and I literally taped them all over our kitchen and had my husband and kids vote. And then I wrapped other books in them, and so indecisive, Shaley, that no one does this, but My memoir has, I think, 8 different versions. So my husband just said that is so weird. There are no books that have that many versions. You're going to confuse people.
I
And
think it's awesome.
I was so stubborn that I said no. And honestly, I shake my head now because it is so confusing. But there's a prime example of extreme, over the top indecisiveness. So.
Yeah, and I think there's this stereotype, and it can be 100% true too, is that not finishing projects or not being able to focus. And yeah, I feel like I live in kind of two spaces, but then remember, everybody, we talk about the extremes, but there is stability, or there is like average. I have average every boring days all the time. So what happens is that people think that you can't be focused or you can't do this. No, when you're into a project, it is laser focused, like to the detail. And that's why when I do big events, it takes over everything, because there's a perfection part of it, right? And so I can totally see that. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes total sense to me. And I think that's, us working together, and it gave a lot of freedom. If I was working with someone that was just like, oh my goodness, just pick something already. Whereas we went back and forth about images, about like
colors.
Yeah. And neither of us judged each other by like this much, you know what I mean? Like, oh, if I move this plant this much, like we got each other. But someone that isn't like that, like someone that's like, different, might be like, oh my goodness, what does that matter? But in our ideas and brains, and something that's going to represent us, like it would bug me forever and ever and ever. So if you're someone that's trying to see, am I normal because it's indecisive? Then we're saying yes. And then if you're thinking, am I not bipolar because I'm very decisive? We're saying technically you might still be.
Yeah.
Question and response. No answer.
Clarity.
We also, I feel like sometimes we educate through listening how we answer things. It explains a lot of bipolar. Okay, here we go. Do you take meds? Yes, we both do. And I know one of the most healing things for me, and let me know if you experience this too, was when I finally let go and stop thinking, when am I going to get off these meds, or will I have to take this forever? I had to focus on, is this working right now to help my illness? And if I'm living a way better life, or more fulfilled life, or more balanced life, then, some of the side effects and thinking about an end point didn't help me. I got stuck. And so do I sometimes wish I didn't? Do I have shame about things sometimes? Obviously sometimes, but I'm committed to remembering that, basically, even though 12 years in, I think, well, maybe I don't need them. I feel like they saved my life. And so if I have to go on it till the very, very end, I've found the ones that work for me, and I'm sticking to it. How about you?
And I feel the same. And I will admit, at the very beginning, I was very hesitant. I didn't like the idea of needing medication to function properly. I was so worried it would take away my creativity. It would change my personality. And then once I realized it's a biological condition, my brain needed some extra help connecting some wiring in there. And, once I actually wrapped my brain around the fact that, it's no different than wearing prescription glasses or taking medication for high blood pressure, that really helped me. And I too struggled with the idea of, am I going to be on this for the rest of my life, and side effects? And I think to just look at the bigger picture, quality of life, and, as a mom, as a wife, every now and then I have the same thought, could I maybe slowly wean off? Am I just more mature and self-aware that I don't need this? And my husband will be the first one to go, no, stay on it. We notice a huge difference.
Yeah.
And so same with you. I mean, stick the course. It doesn't mean I might always be on it, but once I got over that initial, and I think back 10, 12 years ago, there was so much more stigma about, bipolar disorder, medication. And so yeah, it really does help. There's more awareness out there. And then just to know that it's a medical condition, it's a
Yeah.
biological condition, that just helps me to just take my pill. And also, I just want to add in, we do get a lot of messages from people asking our specific medications. And I think because it's a different fit for everyone, I wish so much there was one dose of one pill that worked for everyone, but there's not. And everybody's journey and symptoms are so different that at least for now, we've chosen not to give any more specifics on the actual medications. We don't want anyone to think, hey, well, I want the same pill as her because I seem to like it seems to be working for her quite well. That's not really how it works. So we would just always encourage you to talk to your healthcare professional, your doctor. It might need tweaking. Sometimes it's multiple medications. And so,
yeah. And I think the most I've talked about it in the past was I talked about how just because it was the thing that got me to go to emergency to get the help I needed, was I do talk about that to be careful with antidepressants because they triggered that. And then I do say that I'm on a mood stabilizer, but if you want specifics, we just, our anxiety doesn't let us do that. So we're not because we're ashamed of what we take or anything like that. Yeah. Excellent. So, okay. So this is really, really broad. So we're going to try our best, but, what are some of the hardest symptoms when you are manic or when you are depressed? So maybe, I'm going to try and think about it is the ones that, I struggle with the most. And even though I have tools, the one that I think that I'll probably struggle with for a long time. I'd love to hear how it affects your daily life when you're on maybe stable or on more of a low. What are the things that, that it stops you from doing or being?
Yeah. So when I'm either my baseline is sort of here or in a darker place, my anxiety just really kicks up. During hypomania, it's pretty much non-existent. Confidence, like you would never even believe I'm on top of the world. I don't doubt my ability to do anything. And yes, it does hinge a little bit on narcissistic feelings. But when I'm not in that state or in a darker, more depressed state, that is when my anxiety is at its height. I find it just a struggle. Taking my daughter to school, it's a little bit harder. Getting on the freeway down here is just a little more tricky. I second guess even when I'm switching lanes. Everything is just heightened, but to the opposite direction where, I will doubt my ability, even though I've been driving for over 30 years, I'll suddenly be driving going, oh my goodness. And so, anxiety over that. And then, it'll creep into my relationships, second guess things, catastrophic thinking. It'll basically creep into all the areas of my life. But I mean, hypomania for me though, if I'm flipping back to that, because oftentimes it can be mixed. For me, I mean, it's just, for the most part, I feel amazing. I wish I could bottle it up. I end up putting myself out there, I'm not second guessing texts. I'm just excited. So those are the two flip sides for me. But
I'm curious, when do you have the aggression and the anger and frustration? Is that more hypomanic?
There's a little bit of that in both. For the hypomania, it will be something else getting in the way of my productivity. So my kids, when I've been working on my books, if they interrupt me and I'm on a roll writing a chapter in 3 minutes and they, are asking me for dinner, I could easily lash out at them. And it's just that, how could you bother me? I'm on a roll. Don't you see? Like, get out of here. Terrible to admit as a mom, but that is where the anger and frustration will rear its head in a hypomanic phase. And then the depression is just, I think it's this frustration with myself. Why am I feeling this way?
Yes.
Why can't I get out of bed? Why can't I kick it in gear? Why is the laundry 800 feet high? And then it's just that self-loathing, I'm worthless, I'm a bad mom, I'm a bad wife, I can only throw a hot dog in the microwave, that's the best I can do. And I easily will go down that self-comparison road, because when you're in that darker time, of course, all you seem to notice is everyone else around you doing things with ease, not struggling. So
Yes.
that's
Yes.
that flip side.
Missing out. And you know what? That's where we have found and created, and I make sure that I curate all my social media so that it's people so it doesn't feel bad about myself, and it's not even the people's fault, but just thinking like not good enough or failure, or one of mine is, my life is passing me by, and I get in this big thing, am I gonna leave a legacy, or am I gonna regret, or am I gonna, do you know what I mean? And I just, yeah. And it's interesting because that's hard to say like right now, because I say normally, it's not normal. In the past, when I've been, I usually get up right about now, and the sun helps, which is not sunny in Vancouver when it's supposed to be. But I spend a lot of time, it feels like doing nothing. And I'm just like, am I going to regret this? Am I going to, do you know what I mean? And I see people on trips and this and that. And I'm like, and I have a daughter who just finished grade 11 last week. So I now have a graduate, and did we do enough? And all of that. And it's so, it affects my daily life, because I really struggle to be in the moment, right? In the present moment, I'm either always thinking about the future or the past. And I get, with the hypomania, one of the things that affects my life the most is the anger and the control. So and it's heightened, and I think I know all the answers. So I'm always looking for danger, or one of my big things is not having what I need when I need it. So I pride myself, like as a teacher and an event planner, to think about all the things that go wrong. And I used to kind of brag about it. Like, if I think of all the things that could go wrong, I can go backwards. Or I used to tell myself I prepare in case it happens. But the more therapy I do, I realize I'm like just double experiencing it, or double traumatizing myself, because I'm feeling all the feelings as if it did happen. And then if it does happen, I'm doing it again. So that's a hard balance for me, but yeah, controlling, because decisions feel very, very catastrophic. Like a small decision might feel like it might ruin our lives, right? Or like I've talked about in other episodes, maybe the panic one, about how I could go to zero about buying toothpaste till I'm going to lose my house, right? Like they feel that intense, right? And so that really affects my daily life. And then I check with people, but then I don't fully trust them. So you can imagine with my husband and my children that it is very, very hard for them when I ask, like, should we do this? And they're like, no. And then I'm like, then they think, and then I'm like, you decide. I can't decide. You decide. And then they decide. And I'm like, no. Or maybe, or I go back and forth, or I'm trying to do the very best thing that sometimes I ruin the thing. Like, for a prime example is like, if we're going on a hike, I want to do the best one, the one that's not going to make this person grumpy if it's too long. This one, we can't bring the dog. I'm trying to pick the best one. I spend like 2 hours, and by then I don't even want to go. They don't want to go. And I've ruined it by just trying, right? And it's interesting because I'm either totally impulsive, or I'm frozen with the just trying. So I think those would be mine if we even answered the question. I don't know. We'll see. Let us know if we actually responded to any of the questions. Just kidding. Okay. What is one of your wildest ideas when hypomanic? Or it could be maybe because we're hypomanic, the ideas aren't always out of reach, right? They aren't.
Yeah.
So maybe things we bought in, and we did, if you look back on our Instagram, I should ask that again. And we had to make a little light of it, but some things that people have started or thought that was a good idea, or that maybe speak to some of those. And then maybe some that you finished because sometimes people believe that we can't finish big creative things that we get when we're hypomanic, and we can if harnessed right. So all of that, do you understand the question? Because I literally, okay.
And there are so many wild ideas / business starts / so everything from a motion picture movie to a t-shirt company. You name it. I mean, you name it, I've thought of it. I even in my earlier days had this whole prototype for, I called it the car seat curtain. Of course, now they have a product like it, but I had my mom, so a prototype. I did all the marketing. So
wow.
Yeah, I know. So I've had just so many ideas. And in my hypomanic episodes, there is no question in my mind that I can do it. I will do it. I will be successful. I'll be, New York Times bestseller. I mean, the world is my oyster. The problem is when that hypomania fades away, all that confidence goes. But I will say, I'm going to have to say that my wildest, most creative idea, aside from wanting to buy a giant penguin yesterday and or a flamingo, and I said to my husband, I called him and I said, there's a giant $40 flamingo. Do you think you could cut like 50 to 75 mini ones and we could start a business that goes around on birthdays and puts them in people's lawns? But it only took me 5 minutes to think, I don't want to spend the rest of my life doing that. But my biggest, wildest idea was my memoir and my book. It was terrifying. I am not a reader. I've never considered myself a writer. And I didn't even know if I would end up actually publishing, but I just went for it. I started writing. It took me years, lots of tears. I lost my entire manuscript at one point, and then I would go in and out of those phases. So yes, New York Times bestselling author to piece of gum on the bottom of your shoe, everything in between. But I think that was my wildest idea, and it's the accomplishment that I am really proud of. And I'm also proud of this podcast. I think this podcast, in the middle of a pandemic, for us to be so explosively passionate and just, I mean, it's just grown and grown. I think at the very beginning, it was just going to be 1 or 2, videos, let's collaborate, and just, yes, wild and crazy, and it's come to fruition. So those are just a few examples of my wildest creative projects. But Shaley, you have mentioned that you do all the things, so I'm sure you may very well have.
Yeah. And it's interesting, like you said, all those different things, because when you're hypomanic, you don't think like maybe, possibly, I'm not neurotypical, so I don't know, but maybe the average person might think, I don't have the skill set for that, or I didn't go to school for that. And I'm like, that doesn't matter. Like I don't do it full time, but I didn't go to school for event planning or decor or anything. And I've actually done it professionally. I've planned. There was 600 women came to an event with, something like, I think I had 56 models, and, and this is it was actually for a charity, because mine is a lot about justice issues too. So I combined my whole love of like fashion and everything, and then purpose. So it was for raising money for human trafficking organizations, but it was huge. But not only that, like these things take years and a team. And there was a team of volunteers from the church, yes, but our core team was like 4 of us, and we did it in 2 months, right? Wow. So it was super successful. We raised like $9,000, gave it to, no, 10, I don't know, lots of thousands of dollars. Amazing. It was just a small thing that grew. But I do have to say, like, a lot of family suffering for that. A lot of, crash was about, I struggled for like a month after. Also, some of the other things, like I dream up those. Mine though, I can't, like, people are like, why don't you do weddings or this or that? If it was a friend or if that kind of thing, I can do it. I have all the skills. I feel like I could pull it off. I've done awesome. But one, I never want to do the same thing over because I get bored.
Yep.
And the second thing is I have to be passionate about it. So mine are usually for nonprofits. for fundraisers or for, just have deep, deep meaning to it. Because sometimes when I'm in a slump, people are like, oh, you can plan my 30th birthday. And if I love, like I can, but it's not going to get me out of my slump because it's not my passion. I'll have fun, but it's not that. And so, and I always make them bigger than they have to be, right? Even my kids' school carnival, I think I did 3 of them every second year. And like, they were a big deal. And so, down to me making a giant thing at the decor too, not just all the event, like a giant popcorn with the balloons and all the Pinterest stuff. So some of those wildest ideas, and wild ones do work out and then they don't. And I think the hard part with hypomania is knowing when to let it go, right? That's the hardest part. And you won't be able to tell us probably unless you're close to us. So this is kind of a more serious one. And it asks, do you have suicidal thoughts or ideation? And did you want to speak to that? I know I have some things that I want to say. What are you?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and start?
Okay.
And then, I have thoughts, but I would love to hear you first.
So if this is upsetting or triggering, we're always going to remind you to take care of yourself first. So about 2 years ago, I would have said, nope, never, ever, ever, ever. But the more I've been reading about it, we are only shown on TV, or kind of it's been well known that it's suicidal thoughts is someone that is, has a plan, has an attempt, those kind of things. But the more I'm realizing is that many of us have what's called suicidal ideation, and we don't actually want to die or go through with it. We just want the pain and the mental anguish to stop. And I thought of how many times, especially through the depressive periods that were so low, that luckily I knew that I'd get manic, but I often wondered if I had depression forever and ever. So if you're one of those people, I feel for you. There is hope. I'm just telling my experience, but I used to be like, I just want to sleep until this is over. I just want to, so that isn't wanting to end my life and die, but I didn't want to participate anymore. And so I've known now that that is suicidal ideation and that we need to talk about it. It took me a really long time to accept it and or talk about it because I don't want people to worry. Now I don't want people to be like, are you okay? Do you have a plan? But honestly, asking people if they have a plan or thought about it isn't going to make them die of suicide, right? It isn't. It's actually going to open up conversation. It's this idea that, that we have these taboo things that we don't want to talk about because we're afraid, but it's more and more and more talking about it is proven that it saves lives. So I thank the person that did ask that. And I would say ideation, and thoughts of just wanting to, mine are like temporarily, but when I do want to disappear sometimes, for sure. How about you?
Yeah, and I have definitely had those darker periods, and just like you, it wasn't that I wanted to die and I didn't have a plan, but I think so many days were just so incredibly exhausting. From the minute I got up till the minute I went to sleep, everything was just such a struggle that I think just that exhaustion of, is this going to get any easier? And this was before I was diagnosed, before I chose to take medication. Not that that's a cure-all and that I still don't have those darker times, but the darkest of my times was before that, where I just couldn't see beyond any of that. But thank goodness, those feelings did pass. And it's sometimes I've made a list of all the things I'm grateful, my kids, Mexican food, from the big to the small things, just all the things that remind me that, life is absolutely worth being here for. And that, sometimes we think we're insignificant. And if we weren't here, no one would notice, no one would miss us. And that couldn't be further from the truth. And one of the most powerful quotes that I once heard during a sermon was, never do in the dark what can't be undone when the light returns, because it always returns.
That's beautiful.
And I just thought that was just so beautiful. But yes, and it's hard to talk about. But Shaley and I always say we don't want to, hide the hardest, darkest parts of this, because we just want to get on here and be real and authentic. And I will piggyback 1000%. If you are worried about someone, do not be afraid of the conversation or asking a direct question, because it will give them space to share their feelings, to know that you're there for them. So, absolutely.
And if it's gone a step past ideation, please, 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 please don't suffer alone. Tell somebody, anybody. And if that person doesn't give you the response or take you seriously, just please, please don't give up and hold on. You will get through it. And there is nothing that, you could do that there isn't some kind of redemption for. And so, yes, there's lines, there's just so many things. One thing I do want to say is that sometimes we get messages that are very scary, that say something like that, or help me. And like, I will respond, but I will respond like just to get help, just to take care of my own mental health and Julie's mental health. We can talk about suicide ideation and write us and open the conversation, but also remember that we have disorders, so it can be activating for us too. So talking about it in our DMs, yes, but we really struggle with the messages that are just like help me, like those really freak us out. So if you
and I think it's also important to understand that we are counselors, we're not medical professionals. We're just sharing our lived experiences. So sometimes there are messages where we just sometimes don't know what to say, or we wouldn't want to steer you in the wrong direction. So always reach out.
And I know lots of people are afraid because they're afraid of what might happen next, but I don't know if what might happen next, anything that could be more horrible than not being here. So
exactly.
So I think we've come to the end of our questions. If we didn't get to yours, ask in the comments, and or send us messages. Like I said, I get to them. It just might take a while. I guess, why don't we end on saying something that we would have wanted to hear if in one of our dark times, because I would want to leave it not in a bow wrapping, but I wanted to end with some hope. So realism and hope, that's what we do here. So Julie, what would you say to someone that was struggling listening right now?
Oh, wow. Well, number one, I know both of our hearts are with you. I know it's not easy. I know it might be scary. And this sounds cliche, but I just, in my darkest moments, I would have wanted to hear the words, it's going to be okay. It's going to be bumpy, but there are people that care about you. There are things that are going to help you. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. And sometimes when you don't have that hope, there are others that are willing to come around and have that hope for you. And just know that having bipolar disorder is just a part of you. And I think when I was first diagnosed, it just clouded over everything. And that's all I could focus on. I thought that was my new identity. I would never be able to move past it and see myself through any other lens. And that just hasn't been the case. You're not alone. We're with you. We got this.
Yeah. Also that, you're seen and you matter, and don't diminish yourself. Your pain matters, and the things that, you feel deeply matter too. And I think that we talk about I think it's Glennon Doyle talks about it as canaries, like we're canaries, and they used to send canaries into mines to see with the danger, and if they came out, then the miners knew it was safe to go in. And I think sometimes because we care so deeply, we're people that point to injustices, and we're, when harnessed and when stable and not, you know, delusional or impulsive, we can help others see hard things in the world and or look at themselves, and just to be a better person. Julie and I were talking, and everyone has mental health. Some of us have mental illness, but I know one of the most encouraging things a therapist said to me is that she said, you actually have good mental health. You have mental illness, but you have good mental health because you take care of yourself. You know, you go inside, you try to better yourself, you find strategies. Whereas some people out there, they might be neurotypical, but might not be taking care of themselves. So that helped me look at myself in such a different way. And so I just think you are a beautiful canary, and the biggest thing is you're not alone. You will be shocked at how many Me Too's are there and how many of us there are out there, and we are strong and resilient. And like Julie said, we don't know when things are going to get better. They will, and then they won't, and then they will. But there is light, and there is little things, and we're here for you. Message us anytime. And if you don't feel like you have someone in your life right now that loves you the way you need to be loved, you will find them. You will find a friend, or even if right now it just has to be your therapist, find someone that listens and loves you. So thank you for being here with us. We hope that we answered some questions. And we love that you show up and listen to our rambles, because this is Bipolar.
This is Bipolar. Thank you so much for joining us today on this episode. You can find previous as well as future episodes on YouTube for the video version. You can find the podcast on Apple, Spotify, Google Play, and Podbean. And we spend most of our time where you can join our community and interact on Instagram at this.is.bipolar.
It is so helpful if you enjoy our work, or think it would be helpful to someone, if you could like and share and save and follow us in all or any of those spaces. Another thing that's really, really helpful, if you're a listener for the podcast, if you could leave a review, we would be forever grateful. Again, thank you for being here with us. Let's get the word out. Let's share lived experiences so that we can change the ideas that people have about bipolar and help those of us that live with it feel less alone. See you next time.